was really, can you hear me? Audio
Yes.
okay? Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
That was so interesting because honestly, I think over the course of my many years of doing this, I've been working like 53 years or something as a photographer. It's like some number that I'm incapable of actually calculating, even though I was a math major. But seeing this kind of collaboration between photographer and subject, it's the kind of thing that I think we all look for in our work. To find a person or an idea or a project and to grab on and kind of make it something that both subject and photographer are part of the whole creative mix. And I think it's very interesting to see how you were able to kind of hit it off together, and you got through all through the yelling and screaming days. I can't imagine what those were like, but it sounds like there were tough days and great days. And the thing I would have to say as a photographer, I mean, do you want me to get going, or are we just
No, no,
going in
you're
here? Yeah.
David. Your words of wisdom, we all want to hear.
No, but I mean, uh, I can think of any number of things that I wish I had stayed with over the years, that either it wasn't convenient or I got called to go on something else. That was usually the usual excuse, is like, I got to go to Korea or something. Uh, but where you're able to have a depth of contact between photographer and subject, it's great. It's hard to find that kind of situation without really deciding to make that your life. And I'm glad to see you guys were able to do that. So I wish you both well. I mean, it's Sarah. It's my daughter's a musical theater actor, and so I'm very a lot of little things there really resonated. Um, you want me to just leap into this?
Yeah, here we go, David.
Okay? All right. Um, well, so Frank asked me to do something. What I realized, in 53 years, you can photograph a hell of a lot of stuff. And uh, so I just have plucked a couple of stories along the way, and want to talk about them as I was one of these kids in the 1950s and 60s that grew up with Look magazine and Life magazine. And that was before, if you can imagine, there was ever a time before Wolf Blitzer. um, that was how we kind of found out what was going on those little clips on television. I was a big fan of Douglas Edwards and the News, which up until Cronkite took over in the early 60s was 15 minutes every night. Wasn't even half an hour yet. Um, by the time I got out of college in 1968 and started freelancing, and by the time I went to Vietnam in 1970, the evening news was really something that anchored probably the vast majority of the country every night at 6:37, whatever your local time slot was. But for me, weekly magazines were really what it was all about. I loved Look, which was every other week, Life, which amazingly, they got it out every week. When you see what, in the age before, try and explain this to somebody who's under 30, it's like, yeah, we actually had to shoot a roll of film, and it had to, like, I always talk about the picture, one of my pictures from Vietnam, from Quang Tri, which was the northern tier of South Vietnam. You'd shoot a picture on, let's say, a Sunday. You'd find somebody maybe going to Saigon that night, and you give them an envelope, and they would pigeon. That was what we always called the people who would carry your film. And you would always buy them a beer if they were ever hesitant. Try and convince them that was the honorable and right thing to do. The film would get Sunday night or Monday morning to Saigon. It would get transferred to a packet, one of these big red Time Incorporated film packets, get put on a Pan Am round the world flight, and would arrive Wednesday in New York. Then and we always described it as the most important person in the whole chain was the motorcyclist who picked up the film at the airport, after it got cleared through customs, and raced through Midtown traffic to get it to the Time Life Photo Lab. And the film would go up and get processed Wednesday afternoon. They would make contact sheets Wednesday night. Thursday morning, the researchers would come in and these stacks of beautiful film actually touching the paper. They hadn't yet invented those horrible negative carriers. So the film actually had to lay on the paper and they were really sharp. But they'd look at the contact sheets and they'd order a bunch of prints up, and Thursday night they'd print them in the lab. And Friday morning they'd come in, which was the day the magazine closed, and they'd talk about it with the editor, and we're going to do a story on so and so. And it's like 5 days. Now they had the advantage of 5 days after the pictures were taken, at least you knew what the hell it was about. What was the story? What are we trying to say here? And they would then tweet around with the prints and say, that's going to go in that space. And then Friday night, one of the editors, usually Arnold Drapkin, would put everything in a big satchel and take the evening flight to Chicago. I can't believe it. You're a sight this that it ever got done. The evening flight to Chicago with the final layouts, and they would shoot them with the big press cameras, put it on the press, and Monday morning, 8 days after you'd taken a picture, it would be in print. Try and explain that to somebody who knows the world by looking at their phone and taking pictures with their phone every minute, which of course we also do that too. But I'm going to go into, let's see, I hope this works, screen share mode, and here, and over there, and then here. Okay, it's
Good
working.
job, dude.
All right, my website, you're all welcome to come have a look. I did a story on Abe Lincoln, the bicentennial of his birth about 15 years ago. I went out to Illinois and Kentucky, where he played as a child in this little field, and then where he'd been as a state legislature and at the White House. And the last thing I did was to go to the Library of Congress and look at this Alexander Gardner original 8 by 10 inch glass plate that had actually received photons of light that had emanated from the actual Abraham Lincoln. And I mean, this thing is a piece of glass that got made into a wet, or not a wet plate, but into a negative, into an 8 by 10 camera. Picture of Lincoln with his general and the not Wackenhut, the other his bodyguard, who later it became a security company. That's this famous picture that we know, and I'm shooting and shooting and shooting. The conservator has these little white gloves and is holding it gently by the side, and I had to kind of get above it. And you know how that thing that sometimes happens when you let go of your camera, you got a strap on your neck. But all I could think of while I was doing this was seeing my camera in slow motion going down and crashing into this glass plate. Okay, it didn't happen, but it was frightening. But it was one of I shot this with a Canon 5D. It was one of my first real digital cameras. And I got home and I put it in Photoshop, and it was like, wow, what happens if you hit Command? Oh shit, here. I'm sorry. I don't know. We're doing it. Okay, let's see. Okay, come on, kid. All right. Oh, wait. Okay. I'm using Photo Mechanic for the first time to do this, and it's a little snarky. So I hit Command I, which is invert, and I discover the secret of a negative. And it becomes this positive with now the hands are negatives. And I like to show this to, especially to young people who have never been in a dark room and never seen, what is, would like to record this. I'm not going to deny it. I guess I'm opening system preference. I don't know what the hell's going on here. I don't know how to tell you that we can record it. I go to here, the Zoom. Oh shit. What are we doing wrong here, kids? Oh, I gotta hit that. Okay. Oh my God, the pain in the ass that they make me do for this. Okay.
Can you hit escape?
Yeah. Well, I can close. I could click it to lock it. Yes, no. Let's see if that works. All I can tell you is don't upgrade your Mac. I used to use iView Media Pro. It was perfect and it was wonderful. Okay. Your screen sharing. All right, we're good. Anyway, that's the whole point, is to try and explain to kids who have phones what the idea of a negative is and how photographers not only see film as negatives, but we understand that black is white and gray is gray and white is black. Anyway, it's just one of those things. So the other thing I like to tell, especially younger photographers, is that, let me just say this, you did not invent the selfie. Like everybody thinks that because they can go hold their phone out and make a picture of that, that becomes this new invention of selfie. All we needed was a mirror. So that was with my 1934 Leica. These pictures are about 55 years apart. And I put this picture on Facebook last year, and one of my wise ass friends, Mark Tucker, came back with, here are the sources of those wrinkles. Pretty good. And we've all been through it. We've all put the film directly in the fix and then turned the lights on and realized that it wasn't the D76. And it'll give you a couple of wrinkles. My first Nikon F, transition over to Canon. You could basically track it as a story of hair, I suppose. My ever-present M4 Leica with Tri-X. Whatever else you were carrying, you had an M4 Leica with Tri-X, just in case news would break out. This was the Polaroid SX70. And this was just a couple of months ago with my Liberator 4x5 Graflex with an Aero Ektar 7-inch lens on it. It's all about seeing the stuff as tools to create pictures. I mean, I'm apparently more of an equipment buff than I'm ready to admit, but there is something about the equipment. Each one, once you realize that every piece of equipment has some kind of a mission or some kind of a job, I think it makes you a little bit less of an equipment geek, that you can really understand why you have all these things and for what you have. Each camera has a reason to be. This is the new little small sensor Sony, which I love these little cameras. They're the smaller APS-C size sensors, and they take every old lens that was ever made for a camera from about 1940 onwards will fit on these cameras. So it gives you a huge range of possibilities, even if they're a little kludgy to use sometimes. But it's, for me, it's something I really love, having a chance to make different pictures. Now, in 1964, I grew up in Salt Lake City. And in 1964, I look back now, I'd been a photographer for a year and a half on uh, the high school yearbook and had worked for a little weekly newspaper that was bought by these two guys who decided to really make it into a big neighborhood weekly newspaper. And as it turned out, the two guys were my mom's cousins. And I think I got to keep the job because they knew that they could pay family 25 cents an hour less than they would have to pay somebody that wasn't in the family. So it was a great job. One day I was driving my cousin Howard back to the city after a weekend of being at our house out in the country. We kind of lived out at the far end of those mountains there. And I had my Yashica mat and my old flip block tripod in the car, and I started to see all this lightning. It was unbelievable. And I said, Howard, you're just going to have to wait a minute. So I got out, and this was at the age of 17. I learned that my hand was faster than the speed of light, because you would be propped up with the camera. I put it on bulb, I had a little cable release, put it on bulb, and put my hand over the lens. I mean, it was something I just figured out. Like, I don't know how. I guess maybe because I'd been doing a lot of printing and I understood what burning and dodging was like. Hand over the lens, and when the lightning would strike, I'd move my hand faster than the speed of light. And as the lightning would stop, I'd put my hand back so that I would try not to overexpose the film. Now, the film was really dense, but I came in the next day and I made some prints, and I wandered up to the editor's desk and I made a couple of 11 by 14 prints, which in those days, that was a big deal if you had an 11 by 14. And I tossed a couple of prints on his desk, and he was like, wow, where did that come from? So I told him the story, and he actually did say, stop the presses. And they put it on page 1. And this evening, right before we came on here, I looked on newspapers.com and I actually found the June of 1964 issue that had, from the Rocky Mountain Review, that had my picture on the front of the paper. And I have not actually seen this for like 40 years. And seeing it tonight, I was guessing, I was looking at every week in 1966, then 1965, and then I tried 1964. There it is. And it even says photo by staff photographer. I guess I was a staff photographer and didn't know it. Anyway, it was just a reminder, as much as anything, don't throw anything out. You never know what is going to be important and what you're going to like in terms of the pictures that you take. Now that is not me. I don't know what it is. I don't know what this is, but it's not me doing anything. That really pisses me off. Sorry. So if this does this one more time, we'll just go to looking at it big screen and photo mechanic. I'm sorry.
Fine.
Come on. Okay, come on. This is looking like an idiot. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna do this. And we're gonna do, come on. All right. I'm sorry, I don't know what the problem is, but it keeps leaving, so we'll just do this.
Okay.
I went to work as a freelancer. I had a summer job with Time magazine in the summer of '67, and I kind of got hooked up with them. When I graduated from college in 1968, went around Europe for a couple of months and came back and started freelancing in Washington, DC. After 6 months, it only came to me later that I find this out, that I had been taking so many of the little half-day jobs from the regulars in Washington that they called New York and they said, can you get rid of Burnett? He is eating all our jobs. So they offered me Miami, where there was, at least for the next 6 months, there was a bureau chief and a bureau. So I moved to Miami. Very quickly, one of the first things that happened was the Apollo 10 and 11. 10 was the first trip around the moon, not the first trip, the second trip around the moon, and 11 was the first trip to land on the moon. And for 11, I went up and I watched the launch of Apollo 10, but they had all these famous photographers, Ralph Morris and all these people that were kind of household names. I said, but they're all photographing the rocket. Maybe I should do the people. And the editor said, great. And these ended up being my first color pictures in Time magazine. And I look back at these now. Last year, well, 2019 was the 50th anniversary of Apollo 10 and 11. And so I look back on these pictures that I shot of all the people that came, the hundreds of thousands of people came to Florida, people driving down with their kids in the car and sleeping in the car and on the ground in sleeping bags. They wanted their kids to see the launch, and it was packed along the Indian River right next to Titusville, which was the nearest little town to the launch site. Like, official man on the moon program. There was nothing official about it other than the word. But you saw all kinds of people trying to take advantage. You know, if you had a VW van, you got in there with 10 of your best friends and you drove down to, you know, with song lyrics painted on the side. At the now defunct Titusville Mall, there was a square dance the night before the launch. And I thought, what more American kind of event could there be the night before we go to the moon than a square dance? This guy was like just 100 people short of a hootenanny. But it was great. People would just come and camp out. It was a very, well, actually, here's what's really interesting. This was 3 weeks before Woodstock.
David,
Yeah.
our friend Dan Fitzmaurice has a suggestion. The magnifying glass on the lower right of the image should enlarge it.
Well, I
Then
could
press
go a
arrow
little-
right for the next one.
Well, okay, the problem is, then they're a little cropped. I'd almost rather, well, I mean, I can do that.
Yeah,
We'll go full screen now. I have a bunch of faces over here. If you don't have that, you can probably see it okay. Is that better?
yeah, yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry, this is,
Right.
it's not iView, but it's amazing when you see the cars that are involved and the way the tents are set up. That is the technology that took us to the moon. And people are all there with their coolers full of beer and Pepsi, and the kids, every kid that went there remembers it. This 1969 Ford, when I look at it, I think that's the technology that went to the moon, but that's the technology that went to the moon, more or less. And this was the good old days when there was one ladies' room within about 4 miles and nobody complained about it. You know, nowadays, the women would take over the men's room for half an hour till everybody got caught up, rightfully so. But this was 1969, you know, Nixon had been president for 8 months. Transistor radios, that was a big deal. Oh my God, I got a transistor radio. You know, couples making out, hanging out. This is my daughter's favorite picture. It's the one that we call, if you can't get lucky the night before a moonshot, it probably won't happen. This was about 5 in the morning, the very first little bit of dawn light, and 7 miles away across the water, that's the rocket getting ready to go. So the launch was at 9:30 in the morning, and I had, these guys, I actually think these guys slept through it, but I'm not sure. They may have woken up, but they got there late and they all slept. 9:30 in the morning, the rocket went up. I had wandered out into the water alongside my friend, French photographer, Jean-Pierre Lafont, who was then working for Gamma. And we were looking back into the faces of the people who had come. And this to me this is one of my favorite pictures. The hands are all up. Everybody has got the sun directly in the east in their face, and they're all trying to keep the sun out of their, oh Christ, what is this?
Yeah, David, you're changing, the slides aren't moving.
Say that again.
We're stuck on one image.
Yeah, we're still at the beach there.
Okay, well, it's moving for me. Is it not moving for you?
No,
No.
No.
All right, we're gonna start over. For Christ's sake.
Escape.
Well, let's see here.
No.
Is it still stuck?
No,
Yeah.
you're moving a little bit now.
All right, I'm gonna just come down to, we'll try that one. Oh, God.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I love that.
All right,
yeah,
so that's kind of what it looked like.
Right.
At one point, I remember just being shaken by the rattling of the rocket as it went up, and I thought, hell, I don't want to come all the way up here and not see it. And I turned around and shot about 6 frames just as it cleared the tower. I mean, you can't go all the way up there and not look at it once. I don't think so. So the pictures sat in, several of them ran in Time magazine, kind of small, but they were my first color pictures in Time. Then they sent the stuff back. In 2009, there was some talk of maybe a book being done by a big publisher, and my office received a phone call. Where are Burnett's pictures? We know that he shot for Time. And they'd never seen the stuff at the office, so they called me. Hey, where are those pictures? So I go downstairs, I find the pictures amazingly, and I start looking at these old slides, and I stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning, scanned about 60 pictures and overnighted them to the office. And by the next afternoon, we had a deal with Smithsonian for an 8-page story. Like in 2009, that stuff still happened. When the magazine came out, I got messages from a lot of people who were in these pictures. And in particular, with this guy in the green plaid shirt and his wife in the kind of turquoise shirt in the center of the picture, that he'd had a phone call from his sister saying, go buy a magazine, Smithsonian, you're in Smithsonian magazine. I remember that. So he writes me a note and says, listen, I'm in that picture. Would you send me a file, then I can make a print? And I wrote back and I started to say, well, you know, we don't just send files out anymore. And I thought, well, who knows? I'm including a file. And by the way, if you're in my picture, maybe I'm in your picture. Did you guys have a camera that day? And 2 weeks later, I get an envelope that the wife later told me she'd looked in every shoebox they had and found the negatives of, all right, so let's see, that's Jean-Pierre Lafont on his little
It's
French.
not changing.
You're not moving, David.
Oh, come on.
Hit the T forward.
T forward.
Well, all right, I don't know what that means. Did that change? Can you see him now on the ladder?
Now you just have your grid.
Man, this thing is really screwed. I apologize. I don't know why it's not working.
May I
Nothing?
say something, please?
Yeah,
I use Photo Mechanic regularly.
yeah.
If you hit the right corner, that's your magnifier. It will zoom the image. To move forward then to the next one, click that, click the
Yeah,
right,
here.
click.
yeah,
And then what
Now
do you
you
do to move
zoom in.
forward?
Well, you hit the T, you need to zoom into that first. Click that. Click the right corner where the little magnifier glass
Okay,
is.
but I just did that already. You mean this one here?
Yes,
Okay.
double.
All right, I'm seeing this picture full screen now.
We
We're
do
not.
not.
Okay. Well, shit. What can we do?
So there's a slider at the top that you can zoom in to your left. Keep going to the left. Well, maybe it's right. I don't know. See the little slide? I can't see your full screen.
Yeah, I don't see a slider. I mean, I've used this. for
Next to the word
12 years.
arrangement, there's a little bar that you slide the image. Slide to zoom when it's
Okay.
selected.
Right.
But
So
you
should
need
we
to
go
click
bigger?
on one image.
Okay, hang on. All right, I've got one image. All right, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry, but I've never had
That's
I've never
okay.
had to do this before. But when I click on it,
So use the up and down keys. Sometimes you can actually, well, I use it on I'm not a Mac user, so there, that's better.
Yeah.
well, this is really stupid to have to look at it this way. That's as big as it'll go. Now, if I do that,
That's good.
That's better, David. That's fine.
okay. And if I hit the next, the right arrow,
Yeah, you go to the next one.
okay.
That's right. Yay.
Yeah,
All right. Do you see Jean-Pierre on the ladder?
Yeah.
in the water, yes.
Yep,
Okay.
that works.
Okay. And now it doesn't work, for Christ's sake. Oh, this is really tough. Okay, and then anyway, this is the picture, which I don't even know if you can see it, of us in the water that they shot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Great.
All right, this is really, and then when I took this show to the Leica Gallery in San Francisco in the summer of 2019 on the 50th anniversary, the Robs came and I actually met them for the first time. And I'm showing them there the picture. This is shot at the gallery 50 years after the fact. None of us quite looking like we did then. All right. Now, I don't know, are you able to see the contrail picture now?
Yep, yeah, the clouds,
Okay,
yep.
all right. So this is actually from a space shuttle, and I kind of feel like every rocket has its own signature of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And for the 50th, back in 2019, I wanted to follow up with all the Apollo astronauts who are all now in their very late 80s or early 90s. This was a group that gathered in Oklahoma at Tom Stafford's little museum. And a bunch of old codgers who will talk your ear off. And, oh, God damn it. I had, in 2009, 10 years before, I was supposed to photograph Buzz Aldrin. And I had my little, I can't even remember what kind of phone it was. And I thought, God, maybe I could photograph him in a dark room, just lit by my cell phone or by a cell phone, because people are saying that there's more computing power in a cell phone than they had on Apollo. And I never got him in a dark room, so it didn't happen. But Buzz Aldrin, who's famous for punching out people who have given him a hard time, when I finally did say to him something about that I was hoping to do a picture lit by a cell phone because it has so much computing power, he was like, "We had plenty of computing power. What are you talking about?" I just, okay, don't hit me, Buzz. Anyway, I don't know. So these are some of the astronauts. Jim McDivitt, this is 50 years after they had flown. And this was a piece that ran, there's Tom Stafford, Michael Collins. And I'm shooting, and this was Dave Scott, who didn't want to meet with me, but I managed to find him at that group shot. And I was in charge of the group for just long enough to tell Dave Scott to go stand on the end. And then I went over and photographed him. I was at the dinner and I'm sitting next to these people who I didn't know. And this woman is sitting next to me, and all of a sudden the spotlight lands on her, and they start to tell the story of Dee O'Hara, the nurse, who was the nurse to all the astronauts from Mercury and Gemini and Apollo. And they did this whole thing, and I've got my little phone under the table, and I'm typing into Wikipedia, Dee O'Hara, and reading all about how she'd gone from nursing school in Oregon to Florida and stayed forever in the space program. And so the lights come back up, and I said, Dee, I'm doing this photo story. I'd love to include you in it. And she said, well, I don't take a very good picture. And I used the line that we have all used at least once, which was, well, you've never been photographed by me. So, so I got her for like 2 minutes over in the little gift shop, and she has one of those little bears that says, I need my space. And this didn't run with the story, unfortunately, but it was a pleasure to have met her. Walt Cunningham, he was on Apollo 7, which was the very first just orbit around the Earth a few times and make sure that the Apollo works. But he was always treated as the same level of astronauthood as the guys that landed on the moon and came back. And I always thought that was one of the coolest things about the astronauts. And I loved that ability to carry, and I'll talk about it in a minute about shooting 4x5 as well as digital, and everything has a place. This was the page that finally appeared in the Washington Post the week before the anniversary of the launch. So I guess just because, among other things, my mother was the 2-term president of the Utah League of Women Voters, I always had an interest in politics. And for example, in our playroom, what had been the little drop-down built-in cabinet to the side of the wall became a map on which was stuff like mosquito abatement in Tooele and other things that the League of Women Voters were extremely excited about. So when I was a senior in high school and John Kennedy came to Salt Lake City, I said to Mom, well, why don't we go see the president? So we went down into the waiting room of the Hotel Utah, and he came in, and it was a round room, and he kind of walked around the cupola and shook everybody's hand. And I didn't take a single good picture that day. And I got home, and, like every kid in those days, my dark room was the furnace room. And I started to look through my film, and everything was either out of focus or blurry, or I just screwed everything up. And I looked through it all. I was very unhappy. I snipped the negatives into 5s, and I put them into glassine. I put them into one of the shoe boxes that my mother, even though she was not Imelda Marcos, she bought just enough shoes to keep me in space for my 35mm negatives. And in 1998, when I had to do I was asked to do a show about the president. So we went back and we looked at the Kennedy negatives again, and we scanned it and we blew it up. And all of a sudden, after like 40 years, I'm thinking, it isn't as blurry as it looked before. Maybe it's just the dynamism of this young president. And it's not so much underexposed as it is the harsh contrast, giving a sense of youth to the picture. So after 30 years of sitting in a box, another reminder, don't throw stuff out, because you never know when the picture is going to be one that you actually discover you like 30 years later. And this was the next day out at Salt Lake Airport. This was just 2 months before Dallas, but a couple of years later, Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, who was then the governor of Michigan, came to Salt Lake, and I photographed him. He was just about ready to announce that he was going to run for president. Didn't last very long. Mitt, at this point, Mitt's my age. I think he was at Harvard, and his dad spoke at the Utah Capitol. And my uncle, because he was the Newsweek stringer, sent my pictures in for Newsweek, and that was my first published image in a national magazine, was this picture of George Romney. In spring break of my senior year of college, which was 1968, Bobby Kennedy came to Utah and actually spoke to a packed field house at Brigham Young University, the Mormon university, where he kind of joked at the beginning that he had talked to the college president and that he had assured him that all the Democrats would be off campus by sundown. And when I look at these pictures now, to me, the most interesting thing is that in the 40 minutes or hour that he spoke, I was able to be high and close and move around. I mean, I could do everything. And then, of course, like about 3 weeks later, he was shot in Los Angeles. I came back to that summer job with Time Magazine, and then when I got out of school, I moved back to Washington and started freelancing. Went to the White House, went to the Hill, I was just trying to figure out how not to screw it up. This is Lyndon Johnson, Lady Bird at the State of the Union. Lady Bird Johnson, for those of you under 50, was the president's wife. This was him signing some important bill that I have no idea what it was in the Oval Office.
He looks really short.
Well, it's a big chair. He was a tall guy. He was like
Yeah.
6'3", I think, yeah. And this was at the end of that State of the Union. And I sometimes describe this, the alternative caption is Washington Post runs a want ad for 50-year-old white guys with glasses and in suits to please show up, and they all did. That's what Congress used to look like. So when we say we haven't made any progress, I have to say that's not quite true. It doesn't quite look like this anymore.
That Gerald Ford on the right on that shot?
Jerry Ford on the right, and in the upper left is Frank Church, who was the senator from Idaho. You had Thomas Moore was the #2 military guy. So see the admiral and generals all lined up there. And I think that in the very lower left here, it looks like Clark Clifford, but I don't know actually if that's him or not. When Richard Nixon was elected, he came to New York and hung out at the Pierre Hotel, and I got assigned by Time Magazine to just hang out there and photograph his cabinet announcements. And one day he decided to take a walk in this hideously cold winter day in New York. And I mean, you look at these pictures now and they kind of look like artifacts that almost feel like they have more to do with Lincoln than they do, well, say Joe Biden. But this was the week that he resigned. That's Al Haig at the bottom there, who was then his, I think it was chief of staff. Nixon walking up the stairs to the old executive office building. Outside the Watergate hearings, people actually read newspapers. Shocking. This was a somebody speaking to the press out in front of the West Wing of the White House, and you have like the guy with the 16mm newsreel camera standing on his camera case, photographing it. It's just this stuff. It feels like 1930 when it was really only 1974, but it was a real moment. This was Nixon during his resignation speech. But I kind of get drawn into what presidential politics was about, and always trying to figure out how do you make a picture that isn't just the same old picture. This is the resignation again in the East Room of the White House. And the freaky thing is, you see where those big lights are, kind of just off the center to the left, those big bright lights. About a year ago, maybe it was a couple years ago, I was at the White House for some event. I was in the East Room, and I just had this freaky little moment that I was lining up the chandelier with that far window, And I realized I was standing up on the same exact place that I had seen Nixon's resignation like 40 years before. I just, sometimes the East Room really does not change. That's the one thing that they don't mess around with. And Jerry Ford became the president. This was, and I had worked on the campaign of Giscard d'Estaing, the French president, who just passed away a couple of months ago. But right during the American bicentennial in 1976, there was a US-French kind of a rapprochement, and Giscard and Madame Giscard came to see the Fords. And this was a picture that I made up in the living quarters, which was a rare place for people to be. But my friend Dave Kennerly was Jerry Ford's photographer, and he made sure I got up because he knew my connection with Giscard. This is the Fords on the campaign trail, and Kennerly is that face
back,
over
yeah.
on the right, the bearded guy who is out of position. And honestly, he's not out of position that many times, so I kind of appreciate this picture since he's definitely out of position. Jerry Ford with the two puppies at the White House pool. Jimmy Carter trying to convince some staunch New England Democrats that he should be elected president of the United States. And amazingly enough, he did.
Mm.
Ronald Reagan in 1980, this was the, well, actually, this was in 1976 when he was trying to unseat Jerry Ford unsuccessfully, but he was on a bus up in New Hampshire and sitting in the back of the bus. And they managed to let us on the bus for a few minutes, and I made this picture, which stood the test of time. And this was at some television studio. You know, Reagan had a very discernible profile, so you knew it was him without seeing it was him. When he first met Mikhail Gorbachev, they had their very first meeting in Geneva in November of 1985, and Gorbachev had been to France. That was his first foreign trip, and I'd convinced Time Magazine they should send me to France, and as it turned out, I covered the Gorbachev trip. And
We can't hear you.
what?
No, we can hear you. Fine.
Oh, okay. I had covered the Gorbachev trip in France, and at his very first event was a lunch hosted by the Prime Minister, Laurent Fabius. And as I walked in the room, they had all beat us to this location before we got there, and we kind of came in late, and they were having a little champagne toast. At which point I realized that Madame Fabius, the wife of the Prime Minister, was a woman I had dated 8 years before. It's like, Francoise, what are you doing there? So in this business, you just never know who you're going to meet or where you're going to meet them. But that one was hilarious. And this was their final press conference in Geneva. And when I got in the room, and I was late to get in because I had a tough time, long story, over a martini sometime. It was tough to get into this meeting. They had a limited number of passes. And I came in and I saw that their chairs were like 4 feet apart because the protocol people who have no visual sense. And I looked at Larry Downing, who was a Newsweek photographer, and a couple other guys, and I said, fellas, I think we need to do a light reading. And they were all like, yep, let's grab your light meter. And so we all holding our light meters up as if to say, we need to do a light meter reading. We all wander up, and there was a Secret Service guy right up by the stairs. And I said, we have to go up and check the light here. Do you mind? So I said, okay, yeah, just be quick about it. So we're all up there, and we're all kind of doing, yeah, 100 and a quarter, 250. What do you got? 100 and a quarter, 3.5. Yeah, what do you got? 400, all that photo crap that photographers talk. And as we are doing this, we're pushing the chairs together bit by bit, and we're kneeing the chairs so that they ended up being about a foot apart. And I always try and explain that I am not a great interferer. I do like to let the world unfold in front of me as it is. But when the principals are sitting 4 feet apart, you have to do something. This was at at the last meeting they had in Moscow at the Kremlin. They had come in, the Soviets, they were still the Soviet Union, the Soviets on the right, the Americans on the left. And they're just, when we got into the room, they're just sitting there in their chairs. So once again, I kind of rose to the occasion and yelled out, "How about a handshake?" At which point I could hear Reagan go, "Will," and Gorby was like, "Well," and they reached up and they had this handshake. And so like, bada, where I'll make a picture. And it was like the last time they shook hands. So it was worth having. Last year, I was looking at this picture again, and I'm looking down at the other end of the table, and I see there's like 8 photographers, and it looks like a Soviet news cameraman there, a film cameraman. So I go on, where do you go in a case like that? Getty Images. Okay, I probably owe them $4.25 or something. But I type in Reagan Gorbachev, Moscow, 1988, I guess. And I find this picture that one of those guys had shot with their flash. And I'm the guy in the middle second row of this picture in the back. So honestly, if you're going to have a discussion about it, no flash really triumphs over flash, I would say. But everybody has their own view of how these things go. But it was fun to see that there I was, evidence of my presence. Oh God, what is it? 35 years ago, something like that. This was Reagan's lying in state at the Capitol, shot on a sheet of Polaroid 55. I so loved that film and was so, like many others, heartbroken when Polaroid went out of business, and we lost a real tool in our toolbox. So this is what the press used to look like. I believe dishevel is probably the first word that comes to mind. AT&T would drop a phone, one for the Chicago Tribune, one for the LA Times, one for AP, one for the New York Times, charge them like $400 for the 5 minutes that they would use this phone. And then they had to make sure that the press people were wearing these really hideous ties and ill-fitting suits. That usually wasn't such a big problem because they were always wearing hideous ties and ill-fitting suits. Nowadays, it's more like this. It's laptops, just a scattering of laptops everywhere. It's just a world in transition.
Yeah, somebody brings it up, David. Not many women shooting with you guys at that time, huh?
Well, at this time, there wasn't. There are far more now than there were 20 or 30 years ago. It's really opened up a lot. And the papers and the agencies have really, I think, done a very good job at trying to get more women photographers who are interested in it and shooting this kind of stuff. This is kind of an example of how, in my mind, they kind of take us to be a bit more foolish than we actually are. But you'll arrive somewhere. This happened to be a agriculture day on the Michael Dukakis campaign. And like, months later, had he been victorious, this guy probably would have been the Undersecretary of Transportation. And she would have been the Inspector General or something like that. It's like, well, what did you do during the campaign? Well, I did hold a staff this way sign. This was Farm Day on the Dukakis campaign. What'd you do? Well, I had the buses unload sign, and it remains starkly in my memory. Press this way. I look at this stuff now. It's too funny. Oh, wait, I'm pool today. So that means I get to be up close and get Mike Dukakis having an agriculture day, followed by members of his group blending in with the 4-H club.
You have the tank shot, David?
Well, no, I was not there for the famous Dukakis Snoopy in the tank. I missed that one, unfortunately. This was one day I was testing out the new Mamiya 6. I've always been willing to try new cameras out. I love medium format. This was in about 1990. The Mamiya 6, it was like a rangefinder version of a Rolleiflex. You didn't have to look down into it. You could just look through it. Love that camera. And I started shooting Holgas and Rolleiflexes and Mamiyas of all sizes and shapes and formats. And eventually also got into a 4x5 with a couple of speed graphics. This was George Bush lying in state 2 years ago at the Capitol. The 1992 campaign. This was when Bush Sr. ran against Bill Clinton, Clinton and Gore and Larry King. A reminder that it really is all about the hair. This was my first Holga roll of film on the last day of the Al Gore campaign, and I was holding a little Nikon red filter up over the Holga lens and shot this roll. I had these amazing clouds. It just seemed like it was going to be a good picture. And on the way back to the bus, somebody said, geez, you know, you could tape that filter on and you wouldn't have to hold it there. It's like, wow, you should be a photographer. But of course, he was right. All you needed was a little bit of gaffer's tape or masking tape and your world would change. George W. Bush at Arlington Cemetery. This was a 4x5 shot. I just kind of kept going, always looking for something a little push. Like in the case of going into 4x5, it was absolutely making my life more difficult. But I kept finding that I was turning up these pictures that I was not getting when I was shooting with just my 35s or my 120 cameras. This was the first event that I took it to. It was the beginning of the Gulf War. I decided I'm too old to go to Iraq. I'm just not going. Maybe I can do something in Washington that's a little more interesting. So Don Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz, the deputy, all the big brass from the military is there, shooting at like an 1/8 or a 1/10 of a second, wide open and a little blur and cranking the lens a little bit, get a little tilt on it. And I just discovered there were all kinds of cool things that you could still do in photography that were not at 5 frames a second. This was at the Chicago or San Diego, which was LA maybe, LA. It was obviously a Democratic convention, but the point about this was I got off a press bus and I look across this parking lot seeing 2 women dressed like this. Now, you can spend a 40-year career in political photography and never see 2 women dressed like that standing next to each other. So the only thing you can do is haul ass and run as fast as you can and just hope that they stay together long enough to make a frame. This was Howard Dean, who for a while looked like he was going to be the big leader in the 2004 campaign. And I don't know if any of you remember the famous Scream.
Scream out, yeah.
Yeah. This was another little Holga moment. Dick Gebhardt, another what might have been guy, shot with the speed graphic. I found a very fast lens for the speed graphic, a 1943 aerial reconnaissance lens that had probably had its life in a P-51 recon camera in Europe during World War II. And it was fast and beautiful, a bit heavy, but you could fit it onto a speed graphic, and it started opening up all kinds of possibilities for me. So this is what I looked like when I was chasing John Kerry around on the 2004 campaign. On my left shoulder, a Holga, a Mamiya 6, shooting with a Canon digital camera and dancing with my speed graphics so that nobody else would knock it over. I had already been knocked over once by somebody who had not really bothered to look where they were running. And they just knocked it off the tripod. It was terrible. So we started.
David, did you ever, as you were doing these, did you ever say to yourself, this guy or this one's going to be the president? You ever like, you know?
I really thought, well, and even up until election night, Kerry it was like 49.9 to 50.1. It was close. And if they'd had better lawyers, he might have pulled it off. But it was really, they couldn't decide election night. Same as in 2000. There was 2 years running that the winner had the fewest number of votes, and they didn't know on election night. It was kind of like last year. But we started a whole long story. I'm not showing you any sports pictures tonight, but I won a prize in World Press Photo, and this Dutch photographer chased me down. He wanted to know what I did, what lens, and what 4x5 it was, and started a little website dedicated to what he called the Burnett combo, which was the Aero Ektar on a speed graphic. And it got to be too big for his own personal website. So we've taken it to Facebook, where it is now called Dancing with Speeds. And we have 1,000 people around the world who are a member of this group, all of whom are demented enough in some form to have one or more of these cameras and are still shooting 4x5. And if you go look on some of the stuff they shoot, it's unbelievable. In the age of the most amazing digital cameras, that we're still looking at these cameras that make your life really difficult. And let's see if that helps. That's me chasing down John McCain in an airport hangar in 2008. And of course, you have to have the digital gear because sometimes you need to get a picture. I call this my get to, because this is the stuff I get to shoot. And the digital gear is the stuff I have to shoot when I absolutely need it. So Dina Rudick, who was a photographer for the Boston Globe, shot this little sequence of me. And this is kind of what it's like. You put the tripod down, you put the camera up, you try and focus. I now have a little focusing thing on the back. It's a little easier to focus. But you focus, try and imagine where your subject's going to be. You get ready, you're ready to go. You've got your cable release out. He comes down, click. Oh, he looked down just as I shot. Well, I guess in a couple of days, I'll know if I have a picture or not, instead of being able to look at my camera on the back of my camera and tell you if I have a picture. And what sometimes, I say sometimes, almost always what happens is you get set up, you're ready to shoot, and some sound guy leans in with his microphone right into your shot. That's kind of how it is. But it makes it for a fun chase. And it's one that I really enjoy. This is John Kerry scaring small children. This is from a cherry picker looking at Kerry. And what I had to do, he kept moving around on the stage here, and I had my lens cranked a little bit, so I only had a very tiny, narrow place of focus. But I realized when his right foot, I think it was on the O of the word for, then he would be in focus. So I shot it with the digital camera. It's not a bad picture. It's an okay picture. But I shot it with the 4x5, and to me, it's like a way cooler picture. And Time Magazine actually ran this one. This ran like a half page.
It's interesting, David, with these shots, covering the different campaigns, Gephardt and Kerry, like the guys that don't win, the value, not the value or the sentimentality to that photograph is different from the shots of the guy who actually wins and becomes the president, right? I mean, there's something so.
Well, I mean, there is in our heads. We all the also rans. We've kind of put them into the also ran bin, and they will forever be there. And nobody knows it better than they do. They probably know it best of all. So one day we're flying. I don't know where we were headed. Somewhere in the Midwest. It was near like 2 weeks left, and Time is going to run a cover of John Kerry. And so they come back and they say, okay, it's time for your exclusive. So exclusive, it's like the Vanity Fair exclusive, when Vanity Fair will do one of those photographed exclusively for Vanity Fair by Helmut Newton or whatever the photographer is. And the whole exclusive bit, I mean, it's too much. So I start to get up and I grab my camera, and they also give Kennerly the high sign. He's shooting for Newsweek. I'm shooting for Time. We are best friends, and we can't wait to kill each other. and I said, wait a second, I thought this was our exclusive, meaning if he blows his nose, then I'll be the one that gets it, not David. So, well, we don't have much time, so this is it. You either take it or leave it, which is the usual thing with advanced people that you want to just slap, but you really only can slap them after you've got your film tucked away. So we go up to the front of the plane and we're flying along, and the light in an airplane at 30,000 feet is really beautiful light. It comes in the windows, it'll bounce around. And I'm standing there looking at him as he's looking back at me, and I'm thinking, it's not bad, but that big spot of light coming through the window and hitting his chest, oh my God. I mean, I may have to pull a Mikhail Gorbachev and close the blind on the window. But wait, if I do that, and I'm having this conversation with myself that's kind of like Peter Lisagor on Meet the Press in 1963. And it's like, I just am bullshitting myself more than even I can take. But I'm trying to really figure out. And it's like, I've got the guy over here on this shoulder who's saying, come on, man, just shoot the goddamn picture. And on this shoulder, I've got, if it were me, I would close the thing, and knowing that we can always open it up a half a stop in the dark room. And the other guy's like, get the picture. You haven't got all day. This guy is going to drag you out of here before long. And this guy is like, let's get a damn picture, but make it a good one. Finally, the thing that really got me was that all I could hear was Kennerly's camera, because he's up there like shooting a couple over here with a 50 and like bada 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 over here doing a profile, getting the head on. And it's like, and I'm still thinking, well, it's like Waldorf and Statler from the Muppets trying to figure out which way I'm going to go. Finally, I said, the hell with it. And one of the senators, I think it was on that ride, I've got the camera, I'm set up on the tripod, and this smart ass senator looks at me and he says, they're making smaller cameras these days. It was all I could do not to slap him. But I shot this picture, I sent it in, and next week, thank you very much. We could put type in that hot spot on his chest, no problem.
What did David say?
Well, I don't know. He had a cover the week before, so he had his cover. And basically, all you ever really care about is your own cover. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time to denigrate each other. Well, we do, but this was another 4 or 5 shot in Manchester, New Hampshire, the last Sunday before the campaign.
So, David, if he wins, would you end up being the White House photographer?
I would not have tried to be. I mean, I don't know if Kerry would have won. I probably would have been one of 2 or 3 people who might have been asked, but it was 2004. You had a couple of people that had worked for Al Gore, Callie Schell and Vince Musi. I know Callie had done some stuff with them. I had, when Clinton was elected, I sent in a 4-page proposal to be his photographer, but it was like too much like having a job, it would be really interesting for a couple of months, but you'd really have to do it for 4 years. And then, so I've never really chased after that. That was Hillary. And then in 2008, you had Hillary trying to duke it out with Barack Obama to end up facing John McCain. And it was still fun trucking around this 4x5. Sometimes the pictures would work. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes there were moments that you needed a digital camera. This was the little red light that would help somebody's point and shoot camera focus on Hillary. And to me, that was like the best light. She came into this Mexican restaurant, and we had seen this cashier sign over by the door. So we were all crowded around on a stand across the room. It's like, I know she's going to walk under that sign at some point. And of course she did. And this young guy, Senator Barack Obama, looking like he had just gotten out of high school. This was in 2007, I think, the year before he ran. And one more time, I schlepped my 4x5 onto his plane. And there's something about being on that airplane and the head honcho in their own seat. And this picture won an award in the White House contest. And I ended up giving him one, and I think he signed one for me. You can see he was pretty good with a Sharpie. And so it kind of carried on, and the helicopter Marine One would come and go from the south lawn of the White House. Donald Trump was sworn in. Clearly, it's the most people that have ever before seen a presidential inauguration. And this is visiting with the Norwegian, the woman who was the Norwegian prime minister. I think it was Norway. And
looks like Merkel.
And
oh gosh.
I just trying to get a picture. I'm just trying to get a picture. I've been down in Palm Beach for much of the since January, and trying to break through with his press people down there because he's still doing some events. Not able to get very far. And I was planning. I had not planned to go on January 6th. I was going to go down. Nick Ut, my Vietnamese photographer friend who took the famous picture of Kim Phuc, the napalm girl on the road in Vietnam, was getting an award, basically the last thing that Trump did as president on the 13th. So a week after, I went up to the Capitol and I saw some of the damage from January 6th. And it included this door on one of these 100-year-old doors at the rotunda that was badly beaten but didn't break, and the Supreme Court in the distance. And then I wandered into the rotunda, which I've been through 150 or 550 times in my life. Always I look up at the art. It's an unbelievable place. And I'm always looking for a picture of people looking up at the art. And this group of New York City National Guards men and women were being given a tour by one of the Capitol cops. And finally, I see this picture of people looking up, and afterwards realizing that what they're doing is learning more about the place that they are guarding. And they were part of the guard that was there this is Trump's last helicopter flight out of Washington.
Thanks God.
In the morning of the 20th. And social distancing at the inaugural up at the Capitol. I thought this said more than almost anything else. And Joe Biden becomes the 46th president. And I'm going to just wind this up with a few of my favorite pictures. This was, I kind of went for the first time to Normandy for the D-Day memorial in 1974. I was in Paris. I had just finished doing the Giscard d'Estaing presidential campaign, and one of my friends said, hey, they're going to have a D-Day reunion up in Normandy. Let's go. And I went up and I just became fascinated with it. And I've been back every 5 or 10 years for 40 years. And in 1994, the 50th anniversary, a bunch of World War II vets, basically, they're all my age now. They were all in their early 70s. They're kind of like, oh, why don't we go jump again in San Mary Église? We show them we can still do this. And of course, it totally freaked out the Pentagon, who could imagine only one thing, which was a headline which says, D-Day veterans killed in parachute disaster. And these guys are saying, like, come on, we're going to do it. And they said, okay, you got to do 10 practice jumps to qualify. And they all went out and they did their 10 jumps. And about 15 of these guys jumped. And worth a second martini story sometime. The only people to be where they landed were Peter and David Turnley and myself. It is a 2 martini story, I got to tell you. And one of the other guys landed. You can see this guy's pants are all in mud. We landed on the far distance in a mud pasture filled with cows and cow shit. And this one guy lands and you hear him say, Jesus Christ, I wait 50 years to jump in this godforsaken place again and land in a pile of cow shit. And it's like, those were the guys that jumped into San Mary Église in 1944 and 1994. And what I was not aware of was that as they walked off the drop zone, the sky was filled with parachutes from active duty troops who had just been flown in from Germany just to act as a backdrop for them. And the only people that got any pictures were Peter and David Turnley and myself. And we get back, we kind of finish walking back to where all the press is in this little pen. And we get thrown in with the press, and they're all pissed off, and they should be. They were right. There's no reason to have been kept there, but that was what the press people did. And this one guy, Tom Haley, said, "Well, what happened out there?" And I said, "Man, it was the biggest mistake ever," which it was a mistake, and just an accident of fate. And Haley said, "Accident? Accident? Burnett and the Turnleys make a picture? That's no accident." I said, "Well, this is how we build great stories that have no meaning and, no foundation in truth." But in 1984, there was a terrible drought and famine in Ethiopia, and I managed to get a visa. I had seen the Ethiopian foreign minister on the Today Show, and I knew he must be, and he was being interviewed, I think, by Gumbel in New York. And I got out of my apartment and went right up to the Ethiopian mission, and I waited for an hour and a half for him to come back into the mission. And I stopped him and asked him if he would get me a visa, and I got my visa, and I made it to Ethiopia to cover this almost biblical looking scene of refugee camps, and scenes that you just didn't quite know what to make of it. But it was people who were very stoic, and yet there would always be an element of love, and you would see these moments of tenderness that were far beyond anything you could ever imagine in an awful, terrible refugee camp. In 1979, I went up to the Thai-Cambodian border, where the first Cambodian refugees were coming out in the years just after the killing fields of Cambodia. And once again, it was like, these kids have seen more terrible things in their little lives than they should ever have to have witnessed. And I saw this one mother. I have tried again. I never got anybody's name. I was a terrible note taker. But when you worked for a magazine, it wasn't as demanding to know who everybody was as it would have been for working for a newspaper or wire service. They really wanted names. But this woman and her little baby ended up, this picture won the World Press Photo Contest and was published quite widely, but I never have been able to find her since. I went across Africa in 1974 when an American balloonist was trying to be the first balloonist to cross the Atlantic, and prevailing winds thought he would end up in Africa. But I went to Africa and spent 3 weeks waiting for him, and he never was seen again. And I spent a month and a half going across the Sahel desert, and another drought had plagued North Africa for years. And that's where this picture was taken in Niger. This was a story on Ronald Reagan's Santa Barbara. I wandered down to the beach one morning, and I don't know what he was doing, but the important thing was he knew. An early morning. This is the other thing about being a photographer. Every morning that I've ever gotten up early, as much as I love to sleep in, I've never been out there in the real world like I was this morning when I got up early and I got in the car and we drove south from Cairo down the Nile, and this amazing blue morning mist and the first lights of sun just creating this sort of painterly scene. I've never hated it once I actually get up. I hate the idea of getting up, but once I'm out there in the real world, it's never been bad. This was the departure of the SS France, which was one of the last transatlantic luxury liners, leaving New York just after the Twin Towers had opened in 1974. A lone Marine on an aircraft carrier when we were steaming towards Haiti in 1994.
Beautiful.
This last group of pictures, the one thing I want to say to other photographers, particularly young photographers who think that their whole life has to be in trying to get published in in Politico or Time or Newsweek or someplace. Whatever, all of that's great. All of these things about getting assignments and doing stories and all of that is terrific. But the most important thing you can do with your pictures is turn the camera into you and your own life. Take pictures of the people in your life. This is my wife and our 35-year-old daughter. They're just, I can't say it enough that the pictures that will mean something to you in 10 or 20 or 30 years are the pictures of your life. It's not the ones you do for some publication or some client. The pictures of the people that are the life that surrounds you are the pictures that you need to be taking. Wisdom teeth, frozen peas. That's my wife on the right, my daughter, and my brother-in-law's daughter, my niece, who was a couple of years younger than my daughter, but was like always her shadow. An expressive kid. And she got married 3 years ago, and same expression, just a little more mature. And my daughter as Edward Scissorhands in the show that she did for the last two, not last year, but in 18 and 19 at the Rockwell, which was unfortunately this wonderful place in Los Angeles that just closed forever with our dogs. Saying goodbye at the San Francisco airport. Take pictures of your own life. Thank you.
Wow.
That was great.
That was terrific, David. I got to tell you, you got a lot of offers for martinis.
Well, I got, I'm good for a couple. I can go 2 rounds, maybe 3.
All right. All right.
The story
time
starts to get real good.
Next time you're in the big city, you let me know. We'll arrange that.
Okay.
But that was great. I have to say both presentations tonight were just spectacular. Really, really great. And everyone is for both presentations, the chat room has been on fire with inspiring people. And I have to say, David, your last comments about just taking photographs of your family really rings true. My daughter just got married, and we were going through all of her photographs. So you're 100% right. But what a span of time that you got to document. What a great treat. What a great treat.
Well, I have certainly considered every minute with a camera in my hand as being not really borrowed time, but it's time that's been appreciated, and that I have really loved the freedom and the life that this has given me to kind of parachute into other people's worlds and try and document it. I mean, it was so fun watching this eerie stuff and Sarah's earlier, because mine is kind of an explosion of a million different places, and your work is like fusion. It's like bringing it all down to a core. I mean, it's the kind of thing that we all think about, is like find a story and get into it. And you can do that. It doesn't have to be with strangers. You can do it with people. It takes sometimes a little bit of convincing, but
yeah, I mean, illustrated by Erie's story with Sarah. I mean,
yes, very much.
You tie that right in there. David, where can we get your books? Tell us about the books you have published.
Well, I did a book of pictures of Bob Marley. I ended up, I got sent down to Jamaica when I don't think I'd ever really heard of Bob Marley. I had heard a couple of reggae songs, but I didn't really know anything about reggae. And it was one of the things I've loved about being a photographer, is that any number of times I have been sent to try and do an exploratory reportage, and the editors say, we don't know anything about this thing called reggae. Go find out. So I went with a writer. We spent 8 or 9 days in Jamaica. And the last guy that we talked to was Bob Marley. And we spent an afternoon with him. And they ran one little picture in Time, and the next year, a French magazine, Rock and Folk, ran several pictures. And it was just at the time of the Exodus tour. And I got an assignment from Rolling Stone to travel with the Wailers for 4 or 5 days on the bus. I was an idiot. I could have stayed for 2 weeks on that bus. Nobody cared. I was at the back taking my pictures. They were chill. I was chill. But I was like, oh, I have to get back to Paris and be some kind of a stupid big wheel. But those pictures, one of those pictures got used tiny in Rolling Stone, and that was in 1977. And it wasn't until 2007, 30 years later, that I showed the pictures to Chris Murray at the Govinda Gallery in Washington. And he just about blew a gasket and said, oh my God, where have you been hiding this stuff? So, well, it's not really hiding. We just haven't done that much with it, So he got it together. We did a book. It's quite a good book. It's called Soul Rebel. It's, I wouldn't say out of print. What I know is that they didn't print a second edition. There's also a smaller paperback version of it called Burnett Marley One-on-One that actually is quite a nice little book. I did a book on the Iranian Revolution, which of course only Iranians you'll find, and certain people involved in international politics even know about that or would really care to pursue it in such detail. But that book is called 44 Days, Iran and the Changing of the World, which the Iranian Revolution really was the augering in of so many changes in the Middle East. And then we did a book in French and Chinese called Managing Gravity, which we still haven't been able to find an English publisher for, which are my sports pictures. And like I said, I didn't really show any of that stuff tonight, but
there's your invitation back, David.
Well, we can do sport night and everybody bring a pitcher of martinis.
Ah, there you go. David, I'm going to hold you to that. I promise.
Okay. Just give me a week to get ready. No, this was fun. And I haven't had a chance to read through the comments yet. Yeah. 44 Days is the Iran book.
Yeah.
And Soul Rebel is the Marley book. And I did a couple of little pamphlet books, but nothing that really is out there in the market, unfortunately. I'm probably leaving a book out that I don't remember, but hey, this stuff happens after high school, you forget things.
No, this was a great night. If anyone else has any questions, we can open up the mics and make it a hootenanny. But the three of you did a great job tonight. I cannot tell you how much I really appreciate you guys opening up, sharing. Sarah coming here and showing us all the intimate challenges and journey that you're on through Erie is, I don't have the vocabulary for that really. Is really dignified, and it humbles us all. And the way David really tied it all up about, shooting your family and shooting what's under your nose is illustrated by all the work that you guys showed us tonight. It's just great, really great. So I thank everyone so much, and everyone for coming.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, David. That was incredible. I'm so glad that we got to see your work. I can't wait to see your sport work.
Oh my God.
Well, barman, set up the drinks. No, it's
David, where are you located?
Right now I'm on 54th and 3rd Avenue. And I as it turned out a couple of years ago, quite unrelated to COVID, I bought a little condo in Palm Beach just to get out of the New York snow for a couple of months. And I have a studio up in Newburgh, New York, up the Hudson. And I mean, I probably sound like a big real estate mogul. Believe me, I'm not. But I have this cute little apartment that I've had for 20 odd years. And I love being able to be in the city. I've got, you know, all my photo books are here. And it's, here's the thing I really love about photography. You can find something that interests you and go shoot it. Like right now, not only because I got this book from the library, The Splendid and the Vile, which is the story of World War II as seen from Churchill and the English side. Last year, I ended up writing a novel when I was in Florida over the COVID summer. I wrote a novel. I wrote 85,000 words, which was more than I wrote in 4 years of college years ago. And the work, I need to go back through and kind of do a little rewrite and juice a few things up. But the idea of trying to actually start writing after doing pictures for 50 years has been really fun. But you can photograph anything you want. There are stories just waiting to happen. I've been back, as I said, when I showed the D-Day work, I've been back there 74, 79, 84, 89, 94, 04, 14, and 2011 in the middle. I just went up there for a couple of days. There was something about the veterans of World War II that was so special. It was before the Greatest Generation, before all that. I got that there was something really cool going on there. And so that's kind of become a story and trying to preserve some of the stuff about the veterans. But there are stories like that you just bump into that it's up to you to decide, okay, I'm going to go shoot it. Nobody is stopping you. Just, you got an idea? The ideas are the hardest thing to come up with. You get an idea, go shoot pictures.
That's it.
I mean, it's a little bit like John Derniak told me when I said, well, John, what do you want? Children of War, that's a big subject. What do you want? And he's like, no, you are the journalist. You tell me the story. And man, that was like 52 years ago, and I've never forgotten that conversation.
Thanks very much, Frank.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Sarah.
That was great, David. Eri, I mean, just
And
and Eri, you have to come back as you follow Sarah on that, on this journey, right? So
yes, hopefully we'll have a book.
Yeah, that's
Hey, I was like, David, you have so many books. How can you help guide us to our book?
Well, that's a good question. What I can tell you is that Pete Turnley turned me on to a publisher, a Chinese-based publisher who has done all of his books. And I have a group of photographers, mostly European and Asian, who I work with on, we just do ad hoc projects. We'll show up in Brazil for 10 days and do a project, or Bangladesh. We've done a couple of oddball things like this. And I brought everybody to Newburgh, New York about 5 years ago, because one of the louder cousins said, well, you always go somewhere and you never do anything in Newburgh. I said, well, how about if I bring our team here? Oh, okay, good idea. And so we did a book using this publisher, which I'm happy to share with you, Erie. I can send you the information. A beautiful 140-page, like 11 by 12-inch hardcover, slipcover, in cardboard, ready to just put an address label on and mail it for $15 for the book. And self-publishing, that's the kind of thing, you just get enough money to put it together. You're, finding a publisher, that's tough, because then you have to do everything their way. This way, you rent space, you try and sell the book online. You have between the two of you, you have a lot of different kinds of contacts. You can get the word out there and maybe try it. I mean, I only have tried it once with this Newburgh book, but I have a couple of other ideas in mind of things I might want to try it on. But it's just crazy enough that it might work to think about publishing it yourself,
Yeah, I will definitely follow up with you about that.
Okay.
Great. Well, everyone, thank you so much again for coming, for presenting. And our next one, we do a quick turnaround, is April 7th. So hopefully you guys you'll get an invitation and you can join us. And thanks again.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. Thanks,
Sarah.
Frank.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Frank.
Thank you
everybody.
all.
I'm gonna
Thanks so
go
much.
have a martini.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye, Deb
Me
Make
Sherman.
it too.
All right, guys.
It was
Good
great.
night.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye, thank you.